Hello and welcome to another edition of Positive Leadership, the podcast that helps you grow as an individual, as a leader, and ultimately as a global citizen. My guest today, Angeline Murimirwa, is CEO of CAMFED, the Campaign for Female Education, a Pan-African movement whose mission is to eradicate poverty in Africa through the education of girls and the empowerment of young women. CAMFED works by creating a supportive environment in which girls can attend and succeed at school and progress into young adulthood with opportunities that include professional training, higher education, and job creation. Sisterhood is a vital component of CAMFED. Sisters help financially with support and advice, and by creating jobs and sharing contacts. The organization, which has gained global recognition for its work, began by providing support for 32 girls to attend secondary school in two rural districts of Zimbabwe. Today, its membership is 250,000, and over 56,000 of the members are local, national, and international leadership positions. Angie, was one of the first girls to be helped to attend secondary school in Zimbabwe by CAMFED. Now, as CEO, she's passionate to help girls facing poverty, inequality, and hardship to gain independence, confidence, and the ability to become change makers and leaders in their communities. Angie, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks so much, JP. The honor is all mine. Thanks for having me.
So let's start, Angie, by talking a little bit about your own circumstances growing up and the challenges you face with your family, the role played by your parents, and expectation they had of you as a girl back a few years back.
Wow, feels like decades ago. So I grew up in rural Zimbabwe. I'm the first in my family. So I was born to subsistence farmers, which basically means that we grew enough for us to be able to eat. When we were lucky in those years, we'd have enough to then sell so that you could pay school fees and levies and all of that. But I just want to be able to say that I had very ambitious and supportive parents. They always supported me through and through. And then talking about expectations of my own education, it was a very funny mix. So when they were unguarded, they would tell me about all the wonderful, beautiful things I could do with my education. When they were trying to protect me from over dreaming because they couldn't afford it, they would say, as far as you can go, it should be fine. But, there were huge expectations about what I could do with my education. As a family, there was that understanding of it being the gateway to anything and everything that we could be. But there was always a tempered, anticipation and expectation given our, financial circumstances as a family.
Any particular memory you have in mind, either of your mom and dad, in terms of that expectations, going to school, succeeding, and doing more in your future? Any story?
Well, I'll tell you about my mom. So my mom only went as far as grade 6. And so coincidentally, my mom's grade 6 teacher was also my grade 6 teacher. Oh. And so he would at times accidentally call me by my mom's name. So he would say Messi. And he was the first person who really made me understand how bright my mom was, but also the injustice of her not having the means to go to the next grade. So, he would always say, if only your mom had gotten the opportunity, you would see where she would be. And so, I would go back home and say, so talk to me about your days at school and whatever. And in that dreamy stare, she could say to you, there was no reason, she could say to me, there was no reason why I wouldn't be the minister or I couldn't be the president. But, poverty just cuts your life like that. Those were the unguarded days that she would say it. And then she would say, there's no reason why you can't be that, with your ambition, with everything, and you've got me to support you. Yeah. And then very quickly she would say, but we'll work hard to give you what you need. So it was painful to see that about my mom. And I grew up actually thinking she had migraine headaches because on the days that I would come back with my school report, having passed very well, she would say, oh, congratulations and everything. And when she went to bed in the morning, she would come up and her eyes are red and she'd be sneezing. And she'd say, oh, it's my allergies again. But it was, I think, just her reliving her life and just saying, I don't want what happened to me to happen to my daughter. So those are some of the things that I remember from my childhood.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful to hear the role modeling of your mom, obviously, and the fact that she had extreme ambitions for you already very young, and and that you lived up to those ambitions for sure. It's obvious, Angie, listening to you, we discussed together before, that you work super hard, and you also enjoy your primary school. But did you realize at the time in primary school that you were supposed to stop studying one day? And how did you and your family hear about CAMFED, which was to eventually change the trajectory of your life? So let's share again a few examples, stories of the time in primary schools.
Wow, that's interesting. So I knew without a shadow of doubt that my days at school were numbered. And I knew that this had nothing to do with my parents' lack of understanding or anything. I knew because of our financial means, we're even struggling to keep me in primary school. Yeah. At secondary school, you needed more things. So I knew that actually I had very few years to stay in primary school. And so for me, one critical example that I can give is when I got my grade 7 results. This is the final year of primary school in my country. Yeah. So I got my grade 7 results. I had straight, ones, which was like straight A's.
Yeah.
And when I got the results at this primary school, it was the first time that these results at that school. It was a very remote school. And so, we had the school head there, other parents from the community had come to celebrate and congratulate me. And so they gave me the results and I started crying. And, everybody was thinking that I was crying because I was overjoyed. But for me, it was just a bittersweet memory because I knew this was going to be the end of the road. Wow. I had set out to say, I'm going to go out with a bang. It might be just my final year at school, but I'm going to go with the best results possible. Yeah. And fortunately, just to say at that point, that's also when CAMFED was being introduced in my community. So I remember the school head actually trying to tell me that, I know you're worried about school. There's this organization that is coming here and this school community is select. I didn't hear all of that. I just didn't. I was just focused on this is the end of the road. But a long story short, that's when CAMFED was just introduced in my community and I got the financial commitment to say, we'll support you through high school.
Wow.
We'll provide for the first time new decent clothes, uniforms. We'll provide the school fees, the stationery. It was just too good for me at that time to be true. And I'd never heard of anything like that. That's why it just didn't simmer into my head that I really could go on with my education at that time.
It must have been one of the biggest days of joy in your life, I guess, Angie, right, at the time. And I can almost imagine you and your parents celebrating that day, saying, wow, Angie is going to go to the next level.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. I just think, it's one thing that I learned from my mother is to do the best with what you had. And I had lived up to that. I missed knowing that there is nothing beyond this. Yeah. I had gotten into school and given it the best I could with all of me. So yes, I was super happy about that. But also at the same time, I didn't hear about the opportunity. I didn't know it. Yeah. I didn't get through until weeks later. But just, it was so surreal. When you get good news and you still don't believe it?
Yeah.
And you spend, even when I went to high school, a couple of weeks and months, I just kept thinking, maybe
a dream?
They'll come back and say it was a mistake. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. It's that fear of it being taken away again. That's not fair.
No, amazing moment. And the odds, to go beyond your own story, because obviously your story is the story of many, many, many girls in Zimbabwe and many African countries. So just to share with our listeners, the odds are stacked against girls from disadvantaged rural communities in Africa. 95%, you told me, of them never complete secondary school, which is a shocking, of course, statistic. I listened to your TED Talk, Angie, and in it you talk about the enormous weight of expectations that's put upon young girls who have managed against the odds to get an education. How they've expected to transform not only their own lives, but that of their communities, and how they sometimes suffer from a huge amount of guilt at what others have had to give up to enable them to go to school. So can you tell us more about that sense of burden for you, maybe? And how it's been or not problematic? Is it something you suffered from yourself as well?
Sure, John. So, just to say, It's 95% of girls from the most marginalized communities, and this is where I was born, bred, and grew up, that never complete secondary school. So it's like, this is who we are, this is where we end, this is where poverty has placed us, this is our destiny. And what happens when you are one of the few that get the opportunity to beat the odds? You don't need anybody to tell you how special that is. You also, particularly for me, I left so many other girls behind. Girls that were equally good in my class, that also deserved the opportunity. So you carry with you almost survivor's guilt that, you know, who am I to get this chance? And so you move from who am I to what am I going to do about this so that no other girl has to go through this again. So when we talk about weight of expectations, it's not just coming from external, it's also coming from the recognition that I'm the first of my kind to have this opportunity. And because of that, you are everybody's business in your community. Everybody is into your business. Everybody wants to know how well you're doing, but also you are everybody's pride. And they're like, oh, do you know she's from our community? Look at what she's doing. So it's you know, they mean well, but you're conscious of the fact that this is not just about me. This is about a whole community, a whole economic class. And I tell you, like, for me, particularly at a very personal level, it was the fact that my parents had to sell the last maize that they had to provide blankets and toothbrushes that I needed for school. So just getting into school and knowing everybody is sacrificing so much for me to go through this. And they keep saying, you know, just go and do your best. That's what they said. But I know that's not it. There is everybody's saying, waiting for that particular day when you come through school, you know. So it's that weight of expectations. And I just want to say it was so helpful, and it's still very helpful that CAMFED supports you as a group. So I wasn't the only person at the school. We were like 21. So there were 20 other girls at the school. So you get a peer group that you can talk about all these feelings, all these emotions. We were quite fortunate because we're the first group, right, at that time. So at that time, there was a teacher at my school who had also gone through a scholarship program. So he got into our class and just said, I know most of you are feeling like you don't belong. You're feeling like, why, you know, is the sacrifice worth it? But I want you to know that these 4 Junes, these were like the months of June that were very cold in my country, like are very cold in my country. So he said, you need to see what you can do with these 4 Junes, which is in the 4 years of your secondary school, so you can go back better and address what is worrying you, or you can spend these 4 years pity-patting, crying, and so lose the opportunity and waste the opportunity. So is this weight is so real. It's at times it's implicit, but you know it, you feel it, and you see it, and you need others to carry it with you. Otherwise, you're so daunted by it that you can't even use the opportunity that you've got to break it.
No, I mean, it's fantastic to hear both the super important role, I guess, of your teacher, right? To give you confidence, to give you the right, the permission to think about your future as something that, you know, that is for you actually to build. And also the deep connection you mentioned, we'll come back to that later, Angie, with the community, the local community. We're so proud of what you're going to do and also needing you as a role model. So talking about a role model, as you successfully achieve your studies, I'm sure that along the way, you've been probably, you know, supported, helped, mentored by some key people to achieve your goals, to overcome some big obstacles. Can you talk to me about the power of role models in your own life, right? And who was a mentor and role model for you growing up and maybe still today, by the way?
I've been so lucky, you know, in spite of growing up in poverty, to have had so many people that supported, anchored, and mentored me. And just talking about role models, it helps to have a relatable role model. Somebody who you actually feel understands what you're talking about at times without words. Somebody who who embodies probably what you have gone through. So for me, that has been very, very helpful to have somebody who you can see yourself in that person, but you cannot see yourself in the person again. You know, where you see, oh, actually this person could be me, and this is what they have done, and they can speak to my life, not just in words, but also by who they have become. So for me, one of my role models always remains my mom. So in spite of the fact that she didn't get the education she needed, she made good use of what she had. And she never felt sorry for herself, you know, except in those unguarded moments where she would say, if only I got that. But it was never a common narrative for her. She would say, I'm here, I'm alive, this is now, I'm going to do the best that I can. It ends with me, you know, so that was really powerful. And she continues to be my role model all the time. And she always had this saying, you know, I'm going to say it in my language. She would say, in other words, we should not be afraid of the showers. We've been through the storm. So she kept, you know, reminding me of these, that every single day I have learned something. I'm more powerful. I've survived, so I can survive again. And then another role model for me, you know, up to now is Barbara Chilangwa. She has been permanent secretary of education in Zambia. She has been ambassador for Zambia. She has been regional chair for the Global Partnership for Education. All these crazy, big, mega, you know, powerful positions. But one thing that I learned from her is how she wears her power. There is no ego there in the room. She's extremely humble, and she keeps the mission in mind. So unless you are told this is all the things that she has done, these are all the things that she's doing, you would not say it. But she is very powerful at ensuring that results are achieved in the most collaborative, in the most humble, but in the most powerful manner. So I am a collection of various individuals that have helped me to where I am today. But those are the two people that I could mention today.
No, I mean, I love those two mentorship role models you just talked about, Angie. First, of course, your mom, and the fact she was the purpose, I guess, for your family, for yourself, and reinforcing every day with force the capabilities you had in yourself. And this other leader you mentioned, which was all about leadership with humility. I think you just said it, right? So humble, so accessible, although she had incredible big missions, and you know, putting yourself to serve you and help you to grow, which is wonderful. That's, I think, what real mentorship is all about. So fantastic to share that. You know, I love to shift gears a little bit and talk about this very powerful mechanism that CAMFED and you have put in place, because I think you're really one of the first models to do that. Sisterhood, right? I believe you launched a CAMFED alumni in 1998, starting out with 400 members. And now you are over 250,000 members, which is pretty mind-blowing. So can you tell us what role do the sisters play in helping supporting young girls going through education and in their journey after school and way beyond school, actually? What is the impact and the power of the sisterhood?
Sure. I love the sisterhood, and it's one of the aspects of my life that I'm so proud of, because it has made sure that as leaders, you're never alone. You've got sisters to lean on. So the sisterhood, we call it the CAMFED Association. As you say, is the alumni of young women that were educated through school by CAMFED, and then young women volunteer to support the next generation. And as you say, you know, we're 250,000 now and growing. So by the end of this decade, we will be, you know, we're getting to over 500,000.
Wow.
And for me, this is the powerful aspect of it. This is 500,000 young women from this group in Sub-Saharan Africa that never got to complete school before. So I spoke about 95% of the young women in this economic quintile that never get to complete secondary school. So this 500,000 will be from that constituency. So these are young women with lived experience of exclusion, but also what education can do and mean for communities. So what we do as a sisterhood, as sisters, besides supporting each other, is ensuring that the next generation is accompanied through this tumultuous journey through education. So at the education level in the schools, young women go, like these young women, these sisters, as learner guides, they go back to schools and support learners socially within the classroom. So if a child is having challenges in terms of understanding a particular subject, we still have challenges of big class sizes. This big sister will sit with the child and make sure that they catch up with the others. But also if there are issues with attendance, the young sister will visit home and make sure that, issues that are there are dealt with, discussed. If there are morale issues, if there are financial, they meet that. But for me, most importantly is the fact that each of the young women in this sisterhood, right, CAMFED Association, financially supports the education of 3 other girls from their own individual resources.
There's a relationship between one sister and 3 girls, right? 1 to 3.
Yeah. So every one sister supports at least 3 other girls every single year. So this is the massive multiplier that we've got as an organization. So it's that. But also, besides after school, at transition, these sisters also support on the transition into secure livelihoods and leadership. Because in the communities that we grew up in, like I said, we are among the first to go that far. There are no relatable role models to even signal what it could be. And thanks to the CAMFED Association, we have got breathing, talking young women that are in these communities. I was in Malawi last week, and all the traditional leaders I met kept saying, we have got our daughters, we've just graduated from university. This medical doctor at this local hospital is. So it was amazing to see communities also see just this power. So this sisterhood is not just actively keeping girls in school itself, it's also modeling and embodying what's possible for these rural communities where girls never went that far.
It is so powerful, again, to see this huge network effect to drive system change. We'll come back to that because I think the systemic change is a big opportunity, and I know that CAMFED is driving that. So, Angie, you talked about how finishing school is actually just the start of a challenging journey for the girls to support. But every sister that graduates or gets a job makes it easier, as you said, for the other girls to start their journey. Last year I had the opportunity to host someone you may know called Reshma Sojani, who is the founder of Girls Who Code in the US and a bestseller author of Brave, Not Perfect. And then she launched the Marshall Plan for Moms, a very comprehensive plan for economic, societal recovery for mothers, pay equity, pay sick leave, affordable childcare, and so on and so forth for moms. Anyway, she had an incredible story. Her parents came from actually Uganda, so there are some roots in Africa as well. And, and when she was a kid, she was attacked at school by one of the girls who bullied her. And her parents didn't call the police. And that's when she became a warrior, because she didn't understand why she should be the victim and she should be bullied. And she was just 12 years old, and she started to lead her first march in the US as an activist. And in your case, I'm really moving from the US to Africa, a different context for sure. In your case, as you completed your education with high grades, you could have done almost anything. I mean, we could feel your energy in terms of capability and drive. So what was your own trigger, Angie, that made you decide to do what you do today? Because it really sounds like a calling, right? Like a vocation.
Well, I lived it, right? I lived this. I saw the difference it could make. And I think for me, one of the key moments where I was like, I'm going to do this at scale and or die trying was when we launched the CAMFED Association. And the 400 young women who were in the room elected me to be their very first national chair. For me, that affirmed that they saw there is potential in me for me to galvanize all of us to do this at scale. That was a vote of confidence and trust. I had been a reluctant leader, I think, from primary school, secondary school, and all of that. I didn't like to volunteer for leadership, partly because, I always never had the right clothes to wear. I just thought it put me too much in the limelight. But getting my sisters, the 400 of them at that time, saying, Angie, we have agreed we are going to do 3 things as a network. We are going to support each other. We are going to become the best we can be individually, either in employment, in education, education in entrepreneurship. And thirdly, we are going to support the next generation. And yes, we want you to be our chair. Was transformative for me. So I was like, okay, fine, I take the challenge. And so how are we going to do this? And that has always shaped how I do things. Because for me, it's never about what I know or my skills or everything. It's about how can we all come together and create something bigger than ourselves. So for me, I always want to show what's possible when people get a chance and an opportunity. I like to break circles and molds. And I believe education is the key.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic story, I think, about the way that your peer community, right, of sisters elevated you as a leader. They elected you as a leader. And I think that to me, that's so much powerful in terms of leadership, is when people rally for you, rally for a leader, and are naturally going to someone that they believe will do always the best for them, will always care for them, and will drive the agenda forward. So wonderful, I think, reference to that leadership by example coming from a peer community, actually. You know, CAMFED's story is truly inspiring for anyone who wants to build a systemic change, which I referred to that before. It was founded, as I say, in 1983 by Ann Cotton Obi. It began in Zimbabwe with scholarships to a group of 32 girls. And by 2023, the support has been extended to more than 6.4 million children through a network of partner schools in Zimbabwe, Ghana, Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia. CAMFED as an organization has literally grown up with the first girls supported through school, which is a story you told us. So would you mind sharing with us, what did it take to transform a tiny, wonderful NGO in Zimbabwe, once in a time, to one of the largest girls' support education network in Africa? What did it take?
Everything. Everything and everybody. I usually just, let me try and summarize it probably into just three things. It took the leadership. And for me, this is the leadership of the young women that have come through the system, who are basically saying it shouldn't end with us. How do we multiply and take this at scale and all of that? It took governance, because we've always, as an organization, been accountable to the most disadvantaged, most marginalized girl in the program. It's always about how do we meet her where she is and transform her life. How do we work with her? What does she need? And we are also very aware as an organization of the power imbalance in our sector. So we remain sensitive to it. It might be how we engage with parents. It might even be how we engage with governments and how we engage with each other in that sector. And the third thing, to be honest, in fairness, has been, funding and investments by multiple partners. And I can talk about Audacious, Core Impact, Hilton Humanitarian Prize, Yidan Prize for Education. So it's those three things, leadership of the young women who are at the center of this, who don't need any motivation, any external pressure, who are educating the next generation anyway. So it's not just the evidence of our impact, it's the driver of the transformation and governance and the continued funding that we continue to receive. So I would say, for summary purposes, those are the three things that have moved us from being an organization supporting 32 girls in 2 schools to the organization that has supported over 6 million girls in over 7,000 schools across 5 countries and growing.
It sounds so simple, and I know it's so hard. So if I may insist a little bit, Angie, I love you maybe, given the many years you spent, again, enabling, growing, empowering this organization to scale so fast, so high, what has been, in your mind, the key game changer? Whether it is about the leadership model itself, what is the secret sauce, or the governance, or the execution model, what would you pick as the game changer, one point in the trajectory of CAMFED that got you where you are today?
Accountability to the girls.
Accountability to the
Accountability to the girls. An appreciation of this is where they are at and this is who they can become. And it's not about us doing things for them. It's how do we do this with them. That has been the mega game changer for CAMFED. The fact that actually right now, as we speak, 2/3 of the girls that we support are supported by this constituency of girls and young women has been the game changer. And we do this with communities, not in spite of communities. So we bring communities into this. It's how do we bring and rally communities, governments, funding partners and everybody around this girl's needs, aspiration, and ambition. That's has been the game changing. And it's that stubborn commitment to this girl, all of her, not bits of her, the holistic support she needs to be everything that she can be, and how we believe that is possible. I would say that's what has kept us where we are at and kept us, achieving and delivering, because it's always a place of mutual celebration with everybody involved to say, we've done it. Let's do it again. Let's do bigger, better, faster as we go in every single year. So that's been the rallying point of our movement.
I think it's such great wisdom you shared right now, Angie. I've been myself passionate about NGOs, philanthropy organizations for a number of years in my life. And I've always witnessed the way some NGOs do scale with impact and some don't. And I'm 100% with you on the fact that whenever those wonderful, NGOs hold themselves accountable for the success of their beneficiaries of the cause and keep that as a North Star and get really in order all the stakeholders to execute accordingly to drive that success with the expected outcome, this is when you get some magical result. I think what you just said and what CAMFED does is a beautiful example of that theory, but put in reality. So that's really powerful. Let me continue. One of the criticisms sometimes leveled at those working development is that they see themselves as rescuers and that they fail to understand that people are the masters of their own destiny in many ways. Recently, I was speaking, I think, to someone you know well, Rita Roy, CEO of the MasterCard Foundation, about this, and she was keen to emphasize the need for humility when organizations come into work with a community. So to remember, as she says, we are not here to change somebody or change an institution, but we are really here to enable that change. So Angie, can you tell me about your own approach with the community and how you create a positive environment for them to feel part of the process so that they can enable the change?
Sure. And by the way, I love Rita Roy. She's one of the people that I really respect in the sector. Her humility is, something that, I think a lot of people has to learn from, especially when you look at all the resources that she commands.
Yes.
And coming back to my leadership approach, I believe, and so does the organization fundamentally, that there is latent potential in everybody. We should not let poverty or marginalization blind us from the very fact that there is potential in everybody to be whoever they want to be, whenever they want to be. So the approach for me is, how do we enable people to live their best lives? How do we ensure that we remove barriers on the path for young people? So it could be financial, material barriers for girls to go to school. How do we ensure that we give them the opportunity to be who they want to be, when they want to be that, how they want to be, and ensure that even when you bring resources, it's resources. It doesn't mean that you're the only person who knows what's best for this person. No, don't confuse a lack of material means for lack of vision, for lack of aspirations, for lack of dreams. Those two things are not the same. So it's about respect. It's about respecting people for who they are, but also ensuring that, none of us is Chuck Norris or Spider-Man or Catwoman. We can't do this on our own. How do we collaborate with others in other spaces to be able to bring the best that we can? While we can, we are all on this earth for a very limited time. And so how do we ensure that we bring all the expertise that we can, all the other people that we can, to be able to achieve what we can in our lifetime at the scale that we can, at the pace that we can, at the quality that we can? There is no room for martyrdom or, messiahs here. This is about lives. So how do we partner for the greater good, because we rise or fall together as humanity.
No, that's. I think that's another powerful combination again of that collective action and movement you've been creating. In order to drive impact, you also need to measure impact. I know CAMFED has a lot of data and statistics to not only back up the importance of the work, but also in order for people to understand the wider context of how educating girls has far-reaching impact on positive change. A great quote I read was that your way of thinking is, if you don't measure it, it didn't happen. So how does CAMFED measure the impact of its programs on the lives of the young women it supports? And what are the successes that you are the most proud of in terms of that impact at scale?
I like that quote, that if you didn't measure it, it didn't happen. So if you can prove it, it didn't happen. So we have got a rigorous monitoring and evaluation process as an organization. We run longitudinal surveys, snapshot surveys, do deep dive research, whatever we can to be able to look into what is it that has enabled us to achieve this impact, and how can we replicate it at scale, but also how can we share it with others and, other lessons in the sector. And just talking about success, and, just to say that actually for us is what is our, we call it people level outcome. How are we making lives better for the girls? How do we justify if a girl comes into this room and say, what did you do for the last 2 days, Angie? I can answer that confidently and say, this is what we have done. And we always say that it needs to be very simple and straightforward as well. So for us, in terms of some of the things that I'm so proud of in CAMFED, is not just that we have got breathing, living human beings that are now advocates for education that have come through the process. So we have not just talked about girls' education. We have supported girls' education, and have got young women leaders to prove for it that are themselves going and multiplying this at phenomenal scale. And just to say that of all the partner schools that we work with, the girls are 3 times less likely to drop out of school in the schools that we work in. So that's less. One huge impact as well. So it's not just the individual girl, it's also the system within which they work. So these schools are 3 times more likely to keep girls in school than others. But also just talking about livelihoods. So we work with agripreneurs. These are young women that work with communities to be able to look into how do they increase their yields in the most climate smart sensitive approach. And just last year we did a survey, and over 99% of our agripreneurs reported increased yields. Wow. So this is not just increased yields while also taking care of the climate aspects of it, but it's so significant in our communities because yields represent livelihood. When there is hunger, there's, like all these issues around food crisis and all that. When there is hunger, the first people that suffer are girls are pulled out of school. So when you've got agripreneurs who are increasing yields, we know that also spills over into the number of children that communities can keep in school. So for me, the success is not just for the individual girls, it's what it means for the communities, it's what it means for the country. The fact that we have got over 100,000 young women in leadership positions, young women who are starting businesses, who are creating employment, for me is... it has proved that, it's not just for the girls, it's for the entire nation. I know this has been said a lot. Educated girl, educated nation. CAMFED embodies it, illustrates it, and demonstrates it. So that's my happy point, and something that I always celebrate all the time.
And do you see actually the time, and it's happening as we talk, right, Angie? Well, not only CAMFED is driving some amazing educational outcomes, social outcomes, economic outcomes as well for the communities that you help appraising. But you can also see actually all those efforts contributing to lower the level of extreme poverty in some of the countries, which is still a big challenge. It's one of the UNSG goals that you know very well, given the number of people in Africa concerned by that. So do you have this correlation you could establish between all the work you do for many years of transforming lives of those girls into breadwinners and more, to really lower the number of people as a result of that being in extreme poverty?
That's always central to what we do. As you know, SDG 4, right, which is education, girls' education, is central to all the other sustainable development goals, be it leadership, be it gender, be it climate action, everything. And, just yesterday with the team, we're looking at how many women actually go on into leadership positions. The numbers are appalling world over. So there is that continuous challenge around how do we ensure that outcomes from education are translating into the other spheres of life. But we know that a girl excluded from education is also excluded from opportunity, is excluded from leadership. So those are things that we monitor deliberately as an organization as we go.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. As we prepare the podcast together, you share with me your passion for systems change that you want to achieve. And at the core of it, we just discussed it's poverty, which then is combined with traditions as well that drives families to make some hard choices, such as not sending their girls to the schools as they cannot afford it. So what's your approach to drive such a huge systemic change in society? What kind of partnerships, education support system, coaching, behavioral changes you are putting together to change the game? And what are those transformational partnerships that are truly helping you to achieve what CAMFED has been able to achieve today?
Well, like I say to you, we are big on partnerships as an organization. We want this change for as many girls on the continent and beyond as fast as possible. We are tired of generations of girls waiting their turn when there are more resources or when something has been figured out. It's just not right. So for us, in terms of our systems change work, we are looking at how do we ensure that we get amazing results, not just for some girls, but for all girls. And I want to be able to say this is both our initiative, but also at the invitation of governments that we work with in the various countries. Yeah. So, for example, in Zimbabwe, we just got grant agent status for their girls' education acceleration program, which is looking into how do we support as many girls as possible in this time. And this is funded by the Global Partnership for Education. So we're working with the government of Zimbabwe, Ministry of Education particularly, to see how we can accelerate girls' educational outcomes. In Malawi, we are working with the government to look into social support for girls in school. How do we ensure in a context where so few girls go up to secondary school or even complete primary school, how do we ensure that those that are in school can get socially supported by the few survivors of a system stake that gives them to be able to increase the numbers that, also graduate, but also graduate with better quality results. And we're expanding our program with funding from the World Bank into the Education Ministry in Malawi into over 2,600 other schools on how do you work with learner mentors to support learners socially to stay in school. So even from the work that we have done as an organization, we are looking into how do we take this at scale widely, because we've seen that it brings results for girls.
No, I think to me it's almost the ultimate proof point, Angie, about NGO impact. Whenever you get to a point where your impact measurement that you talked to us about before, right, which is very precise, in terms of livelihoods, in terms of, as well, of poverty levels going down, well, you get the permission to be funded by public services, by governments, by the World Bank, because in a way, you've been proving that you have such an effective model, which is more effective than many government programs, by the way, do, that you can become a trusted partner of such organizations. So hats down on what you do, because that's pretty amazing to see the model you built. Recently I was lucky enough to have a guest, I think, who is also someone you know well on the podcast, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Nguka, the former executive director of UN Women and deputy president of South Africa. And like you, she's a great believer in the importance of playing it forward. And she's also been a key mentor all of her life. She said that she gets a great deal out of being a mentor, more in fact than the person she's mentoring. So together we discussed about two role models you had before, but now we're going to turn the table on you as a mentor, right? What have you got of being a mentor yourself? Because I know you've been mentoring many, many girls and many people, not just girls, I guess. And what have been your learning along the way? And what would be your advice for people to be a more effective mentor? What is your best practice as a passionate mentor, Angie?
Wow, that's interesting. And I have I've had the privilege of mentoring, but also being chosen by various girls, and to be honest, boys as well, to be their mentor. And I just want to say that for me, that's been a phenomenal privilege. And one of the things that I have learned in effective mentoring is make them understand that you are human. You are not a god, and be transparent about your lessons, your errors, your mistakes, what you have learned, and where you were confused, your anxieties, what you didn't know, because unless we make it real, there is almost a sense of an unattainable capacity to lead or to transform. So keep it real, be authentic about it, but also respect individual autonomy for them to be who they want to be, how they want to be. So I see my role as a mentor for me as, how do we remove the mud? How do we get to the patient inside that's there, that probably from what has happened or not happened, you're starting to doubt that patient can. So it's all about how do we get to that patient in between, but it's them. It's not me trying to create other angels and all of that. And I take an approach in life that every single day I want to do the best that I can. So when I go to bed and I hit the pillow, I'm empty. I have used today's potential. So I have no interest in replicating me in anybody else. So as a mentor, you also need to keep it in mind that this is an independent, autonomous person, and I need to allow them to be the best possible them, to bring to the world the best version of themselves, the greatest change as they aspire. It's not about me creating all these mini. It's not about that. I don't need to do that. I need to do my best. Let this person do their best. My role is, if I should be, just a cheerleader and remind them of the fact that even I make mistakes. Even I am anxious at times, and at times I'm confused. At times I don't know. So it's good to be able to keep it real that, and that leadership is not positional, right? It's not, you're appointed. CEO is my job, but that's not meaning that I'm a leader. It doesn't follow like that. So I have learned a lot from, like girls and other young women that I've mentored. It's helped me to reflect on my own journey as they share on theirs, and to realize that, I had forgotten. I went through similar. So I appreciate that. It's been mutual learning.
Yeah, no, very valuable insight, Angie, and 100% agree with you on this one as well. That a great mentor, because there's different wording for different reason. Actually, for a coach, is at the end of the day to unleash the potential of the person you are working with. You are enabling to grow as a person. And I think what you just talked about, showing your own vulnerability, the fact that you are not inaccessible, the fact that you made mistakes as well, and really getting to the core of the potential of the person or the challenge that she has, and tries to help her unblock that with her mind. It's so powerful. So wonderful, again, examples that you can propagate to so many people across you. Continuing a bit of discussion, CAMFED programs span across social justice to economic development, all the way to climate action. As a matter of fact, you've been advocating the role for women to become the ultimate climate change fighters. Can you elaborate on why you believe that educated girls will be the best champions and the most effective at addressing the root cause issues of climate change in Africa?
Well, I know this because, the CAMFED Association, the sisterhood, have been so effective and so self-driven and so transformative in the education sector because they've lived the exclusion, they've seen the impact, it's lived experience. And it's the same thing for me in terms of women and climate change, because women pay the price for climate change. They know what it feels like. They know the reality of it. So how do we empower them so that this is not happening to them, but they have got tools to bounce back, tools to protect themselves, and tools to galvanize communities around them. So this is basically taking the same network approach, the same aura and drive I've seen, drive education from our work, and saying, let's take it to climate. And to say that CAMFED's engagement with climate was driven by young women that came through the program, that are climate experts themselves, who said, actually, this is one thing that we need to deal with, because we have seen what it does to education. We know like millions of children, education is disrupted when classrooms are destroyed. We know that actually when there is, heat extremes or like climate extremes like heat or cold, girls don't go to school, or, girls and boys, or rivers are flooded, the most marginalized suffer again. So it was like, okay, fine, this is not a separate issue. It is as central as the education itself. So how do we take back control? We take back control by understanding what exactly is this about, and what can we do about it, and how can we become advocates and improve people's understanding of the personal effects of climate change on communities, across Africa and everywhere else. So I believe that because they've lived the effects and have seen what happens when you're in control, that's why, women will make the best advocates for climate change. But I also just want to say that, for me, it's women in partnership with men.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be women's burden to bear. And for us as an organization, it's never been about, okay, women, girls carry this alone. The CAMFED Association works with traditional leaders who are predominantly men. We have had traditional leaders actually donate land to our young women when they get to understand how most of the young women don't own land, like how women don't own land in Africa. So when traditional leaders get it, and say, oh, actually, we need to donate this land to young women, for me, we're winning. So it's about all of us in our differences coming together and saying, how do we do better as we go forward?
Yeah. No, you make me think that, and I had a few of the discussions with a few leaders across Africa last 6-9 months, that climate change in Africa, there's no playbook. And the only playbook that could be done has to probably be designed, invented by both those girls and also youth entrepreneurship, I think, in Africa. Met with many young entrepreneurs in Africa, and they live the challenges of climate change every day in their lives. They know what it is. They understand what are the implications of that in their livelihoods, in terms of social challenges as well, beyond the mere pollution, of course, and everything else. And I do believe this is very powerful to harness the potential of such organizations like CAMFED and others to really think through the way real solution can be brought about with those change makers, your network of young girls and others.
Yeah, I like that. I always say there's no substitute for lived experience. I've seen some books written on Africa, and I'm like, which Africa is this? Or even books written about my country or rural areas that I grew up in, and I'm like, what is this about? There's just no understanding around all the suck that's behind it. So it helps to have people that are worst hit by it, but that also understand the intricacies of decisions and how people make decisions around, we are going to do stream bank cultivation. What is it that is driving that? Because when you know that, you can address it. It's not about, like parachuting solutions. It won't work if you don't understand not just the psyche, but the fundamentals of how that society is organized and perceptions and all of that. That's what has made, CAMFED for me very efficient and very powerful, because we never come with any, like we've got a mega solution. For us, we look at what is it that you want for your children, for your community. How can we support you? It's never, we've got pockets of money, we're going to solve it. No, money doesn't solve anything. No. It's people who do. So how do you ensure that you contribute to their vision rather than thinking, yours is not good enough, mine is more beautiful, more powerful? It won't work. So it's the same thing about climate action as well. We can't make the assumption that people don't feel the impact or are not panicked. They are. So that's usually, I think, where the challenge is, where people think, people don't understand, we're going to make them understand the value of education or what. No, we know way too deeply and too painfully what that means. So don't lecture. Can we talk about what we can do now?
No, it's so true. I mean, it's so true about the power of those lived experiences, and I think we need to enable those lives again. So we're coming almost to an end, Angie. I've got a couple of more questions before we end. Unfortunately, because I think it's an incredible dialogue we have and could spend a lot of more time. I'd like you to go back a little bit more. You've been already sharing some of your traits of leadership during our conversation. But I'd love to learn even more about the way you've been learning yourself, right, to become a leader. I know you're big on collaboration and using your position to make a positive impact at very large scale, which we discussed together. So talk to me about your leadership ethos and principles and the lessons, a couple of the key lessons you learned along the way about the best way to become a very effective leader that you are today.
Well, JP, I'm a work in progress. I will accept that. I'm not done yet. And I believe the fact that I'm still breathing and talking to you right now means I still have a lot to learn. But for me, the most powerful lesson I learned is that there is no model for leadership. There is no template we all need to fit in. I need to be authentic in my leadership. That's the most important thing. I need to be me as I lead and to be the best me possible, because that allows others to be who they are and be the best that they can be. That's, for me, I feel that's the most important thing for leaders. Be authentic. Don't try and, I can't be JP. I can't, try and pretend to be, Nelson Mandela. It's, when we try and pretend and fake it, we are depriving the world of our uniqueness within our time and our season. So for me, it's that, be the authentic you. There is no mold to fit here. There is no template. So that's the most important thing. And as you do that, stretch the boundaries of what's possible. There's so much in you. Always look into what if I could. So for me, I believe that every single day I learn something new, so I can go tomorrow and do better. And learn to also forgive yourself when you've made errors and acknowledge that, oh yeah, if I knew better, I would have. So next time do the I would have. So don't get all stuck up in perfection. Be present and do all of that. And the second thing that you already mentioned is collective leadership. It can be very lonely, and nobody is expecting anybody to play God, right? So I feel that at times leaders tend to think that I need to do this alone. For me, I love being a member of the CAMFED Association, because I've got over 250,000 young, like other young women.
With you.
250,000 sisters who are keeping me in check, who can always like, what was that about? Or, just before I came on this call, one of them was like, what kind of hairstyle is that? And she started fixing my hair. So it's, you've got people that don't care about titles or whatever, people that just are going to keep it real with you every single time. And you're also going to keep it real with them. So it's not just collective leadership with other organizations, with other like-minded people, but also have a tribe, have a sisterhood, have a brotherhood, whatever it is that will help you to, fill up your tank, but also where you can go with your tears, your confusions, your anxieties, and all of that, and know that they will pick you up. They find me in pajamas and just say, actually, you messed up last time, but how can you fix this? You need that sisterhood. So for me, I see myself as so lucky to have all this constituency of young women, and to know that I don't have to be or do everything, because there is all these other young people, all these other organizations that are working on this. And my duty is just to turn up and do the best that I can. That's so for me, I believe in that. And I also believe that we need to ensure that it is about the child all the time. And this is something that, I always want our sector to understand. It's not about whether CAMFED does better than this other organization or this agency. No, it has never been about us. It's always about the child. So how do we all come together to improve the outcomes for the children in our lifetime, while we are all still here breathing? There is no competition here. It is not even fair to be competing over children. If we are competing, let's have collective, positive achievement competition, where it's how do we get better together, rather than, I do better than this. So this is something that I feel that, we need to continue to have. And just a final point, remember who you're accountable to. That's the final. So collective, so it's issues around authenticity, it's collective, but remember accountability, remember your point of arrival, and that's something that for me has been amazing. And I talked to you about Barbara as a mentor before. She was super helpful to me on that, because come on, I'm coming from a context where I feel like the system is unjust to us. So I was so impatient in my attempt to to achieve change, so impatient to the point of being impolite and just like going guns blazing with, government system, everybody. And then she just said to me, what do you want to achieve? Do you want them to be ashamed of what they did, or do you want them to start doing things differently? So you need to remember where we're going. So that was really very powerful, because, we can really be very angry, so blunted, and, be what you call it, an elephant in a china shop. Is that the expression? Or you're actually going to say, how do we move forward together collectively in the most productive way for the child or for whatever cause it is. So never forget your North Star while you are in this, especially when you feel tempted to burst and point fingers. So that's my three key approaches. I can go on and on and on, but like I said, I'm a work in progress, JP.
I think it's a fantastic work in progress, I can tell you, for sure. And in a way, I could almost envision, Angie as the enabling 1 million sisters leadership, model. That's what you do. You're on 250,000. I'm sure you're going to be soon enabling 1 million sisters, and it's so powerful to see that collective leadership model you built. To me, that's super strong. So my very last question, I promise you, because I know you have other things to do as well, Angie. Now, to finish with our listeners, what advice would you give to young leaders, anywhere in the world, by the way, not just in Africa, anywhere in the world, who are passionate about making a positive impact in their lives? What is that one advice you want to leave us with?
Is that you can. I want every young person across the world to know that you can do this. Right? You can do that. Believe in yourself. There is no template. And yes, learn from others, reflect on what they have done, but there is a reason why there's just one of you, and there's a reason why there's one of you in this season, in this time. And, baby sis, baby brother, whatever, please, you have got very limited time on this earth. So use it wisely and use it in the most powerful manner that you can. And I know that this is a message for young people, but I also just want to say that for me, there's also a message around funding that one of the reasons why young people don't live up to their potential is that there's so much limited resources. So even as I talk about all the millions that CAMFED is reaching, it breaks my heart that there are so many millions of girls and boys who are out of school across the world. And education opens up so many doors. So if that's an area that could continue to be looked into in terms of how that support can be provided, and for the young people, when you get that chance, use it to the best way that you can. And, don't underestimate how much energy, bounce back, wisdom is in you. You can.
Yes, you can.
That's my message.
Well, fantastic, Angie. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It was such a wonderful, inspiring conversation and generating, honestly, so much energy in myself, and I'm sure I can hear the vibes across the world as well, the podcast, and a lot of optimism for all of us. So thank you so much, and looking forward to see still an amazing impact on CAMFED under your leadership.
Thanks so much, JP. I appreciate this opportunity, and together we can make this world a better place.
Thank you.
Keep at it.